Русский? Советский.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another episode of Ushanka Show, stories about life in the Soviet Union. My name is Sergei Sputnikov and back in 1971 I was born in the USSR. In today's video we're going to talk about Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Comrade Lenin, and monuments of him that were erected all over the Soviet Union. And in the second part of this video we're going to watch a collection of Soviet-era vintage films that show торжественное открытие памятника Владимиру Ильичу Ленину, ceremonial opening of Vladimir Lenin monuments that happened in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s all over the Soviet Union. If you follow my channel, you may remember that I already made quite a few videos on the topic of Vladimir Lenin, and link for those videos will be below in the comment section. And while talking to you about Vladimir Lenin, it dawned on me at some point that there was a lot of similarities between promoting image of Vladimir Lenin in the Soviet Union and promoting image of Jesus. So it dawned on me like, oh my goodness, Comrade Lenin was Soviet Jesus. And similarities are kind of stunning. We had a lot of images of Comrade Lenin hanging out with kids, similar to images of Jesus hanging out with kids. Besides thousands of monuments of Vladimir Lenin, and fun fact, in Ukraine we had around 5,500 monuments of Lenin by 1991. We also had a lot of streets and squares named after Lenin, so pretty much any decent-sized town or city would have at least a street of Lenin, улица Ленина, square of Lenin, so Leninskaya площадь. There will be factories named after Lenin, collective farms named after Lenin, universities named after Lenin, and so on. For example, this is one of the main streets in downtown Kiev, and it used to be called Lenin Street, улица Ленина, until 1992. Then it was renamed into улица Богдана Хмельницкого, Bogdan Khmelnytsky Street. But before revolution, of course, it didn't have a name of Lenin. It was called Fundukleyevskaya Street. And there were at least two monuments of Lenin in Kiev, both located right downtown. The newer one was huge, and it was erected in 1977 to mark 70th anniversary of October Revolution of 1917. But this Lenin's monument, which was erected in 1946, and it looked more reasonable size-wise, it had way more interesting story. And of course, I need to mention, Comrade Lenin never ever visited Kiev, so he had nothing to do with capital of Ukraine, besides it was one of the Soviet republics. There was no footprints of Lenin in Kiev ever. First of all, the location was hilarious because they installed monument of Lenin, leader of the Communist Party, right across from the largest farmers market in Kiev, Bessarabsky Rynek. Well, during the Soviet times it wasn't called farmers market, it was called collective farm market, but still everyone knew Bessarabka. That was where the most expensive vegetables, meat, fruits were sold, and you had a monument of Lenin staring at it. So this is the opposite view. This is how you see the monument of Lenin from the front of Bessarabka market. But what's really cool about this monument, before it landed in Kiev in 1946, it traveled across the ocean to United States and back in 1939-1940. This monument was a part of the exhibition The Soviet World of Tomorrow at the New York World's Fair of 1939. So inside of the Soviet Pavilion there were two red granite statues, one of Comrade Lenin and another one of Comrade Stalin. I couldn't locate actual photos, but there's a socialist realism art depicting those two monuments. So after the exhibition was closed in 1940, those monuments went back to the Soviet Union, and of course then we had a real mess. World War II started in 1939. Germany attacked Soviet Union in 1941, so both monuments were somewhere in storage, and then Lenin finally found a new home in Kiev in 1946. I'm not sure where the Stalin monument was placed after the end of the World War II, but most likely was removed later during de-Stalinization under Nikita Khrushchev, but currently it's located in Moscow, and that's its current photo, and it is slightly defaced. Well, Lenin's monument in Kiev also was defaced in 2009, but it was restored until it was completely removed in 2013. That newer huge monument of Lenin dedicated to October Revolution anniversary was removed first, right away in October of 1991. And I don't feel bad about that because it was huge, totally out of place. And of course, the square was renamed as well. It used to be called Площадь Октябрьской революции, so the October Revolution Square, and it was renamed into the Independence Square, or most people know it now as Maidan, because square in Ukrainian is Maidan. So there was Independence Maidan, Maidan Незалежності, and everyone knows it now just like Maidan. But when it comes to the older 1946 monument of Lenin located near Bessarabka, I feel bad it was destroyed just because of its unique historical value. Sure, it could be removed, but they should put it somewhere in a museum or something. I don't know, but it's just my opinion. But I have to admit, during the Soviet days, this whole Lenin monument thing was way overboard. We even had a science fiction art depicting Soviet cosmonauts chiseling away and making a monument of Lenin on the moon.
Чего не смеетесь-то? Не смешно? Не поняли, да? Это Россия.
And it's quite possible that thousands of years from now, when the planet Earth will turn into the water world, curious explorers will be wondering, who the hell is this guy pointing somewhere in the depth of the ocean? And now it's movie time! Let's watch how the Soviet people marked opening yet another monument of Comrade Lenin all over the Soviet Union. Enjoy the show.
Thanks.